All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Charlie 407 Defensive Operations. Hope everybody had a good weekend. We also didn't talk about that earlier. Hey, real quick, here are our standards. So we have 5 standards. So you have how many quiz questions? 10. I think they did the math correctly on this one, so you guys should be good, okay? So today, purpose of defensive operations. We'll also discuss the characteristics and how we can conceptualize that for a tactical problem. And then we'll go over some defensive planning considerations. Again, we'll look at that by warfighting function. That will help you guys to tease that out from your respective subject matter expertise levels. And then we'll also look at purposes and considerations for transitioning, because as we alluded to last time, offense is our decisive form of maneuver, right? So really, if you notice during your readings, a lot of the purposes and characteristics kind of lead you to be able to push back into offensive operations, okay? So homework looks very similar to what we did last time. Please keep in mind, I'm more interested in the doctrinal concepts that you guys do today, okay? So we're going to break off into these groups, share your answers for a few minutes, and then we'll select some groups to go through what they came up with from their homework on the board and kind of tease out some of the questions as a group. We'll do that for a little while before we transition to the next portion of the lesson. Any questions? Okay, go ahead and break in your groups.
Grab that board.
All right, group 4. What do you got for tactical problem statement?
Tactical problem statement, we said, how does Task Force 136 Infantry defend against an enemy combined arms battalion in canalizing terrain given 1 combined arms battalion plus enablers in 24 hours with minimal civilian disruption?
Okay. How'd you guys come up with it? Just pick it apart. What are the elements of the problem statement that you pulled out and why you chose it?
So the who is obviously us. The enemy based on the task org on the homework assignment was 1 enemy combined arms battalion. The order also gave us 24 hours, and they gave us our friendly task org, which was us plus engineers and plenty of indirect fire support. And then the higher purpose is to maintain the mobility corridor for the brigade's counterattack.
Okay, so lead me into your, let's skip characteristics real quick. Lead me into your specified implied tasks.
Specified as defend key terrain south of Fieldville. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get mine up too so I can read with my eyes too. And then F-pull the ABCT forward, and then follow and support the main effort, as you were follow and prepare to be the reserve for the main effort, okay, as specified. Imply would be, I don't think we have it written up there, but we have, or do you?
Conduct recon.
Conduct recon to identify avenues of approach, and then EA dev in place obstacles, etc.
Okay. What do we have that's different so far, just from the group at large? What's very different problem statement-wise that you may have with your group that, yeah, Eric?
So we talked about changing from defend to retain. Again, trying to keep the problem statement as big as possible. You're trying to retain the mobility corridor. Place you really like kind of canalize yourself, if you will, by pushing yourself to just a defense.
No pun intended, right? Hey, what does the brigade commander say we have to do as well? The brigade commander says retain. Okay, so not necessarily wrong, because you're trying to defend a specific area. And he also says, you need to conduct a defense, and I want you to retain specific area. Okay? Do you guys have something different over here at all? How does establish a defense south of Fieldville? You guys were more specific on Highway 9 and 13. Battalion size task force. We got time again. Okay? Anything else that was strikingly different? Rick?
With the enemy, I highlighted that they had heavy artillery support.
Okay.
I assume that was out like brigade or division level support. I don't think that was pretty critical.
Okay. So we teased out a little bit more with the enemy side of the house. Anything else?
We also concentrated on, for terrain, multiple avenues of approach, just to focus on making sure we've got something in place where there's basically that saddle to the east that we had to make sure that was a route that they could take that we're going to have to deal with.
Did you list it as multiple avenues of approach, or did you list it as the 2 specific highways? Just curious.
No, mobility corridors with multiple avenues.
Okay. So another way to write 2 different things, right? Highway 9 and 13, multiple avenues of approach, 2 different corridors, etc. Okay. Specified implied tasks. Anything that's different? So specified tasks: defend, FPOL, be prepared to. What else? Do we have anything that's different? Yeah, Connor.
We will become the reserve, so that's the
Okay.
specified.
Okay. Anything else?
Plan your obstacles.
Specified task?
It's specified you have 3 obstacles to plan.
Okay. Did it dictate types at all?
No, but it did say you will have 3 to plan.
I think it gave us 3 choices of how we emplace engineers, but not necessarily we had to do 3 obstacles.
So I think that's something we have to probably just what does it say? What does it say in the order?
That's why I wrote for ours that it's just integrate engineers. It's up to that ground force commander to actually dictate what that integration looks like.
Okay. And we'll go further into like different types of obstacle zones, groups, etc. Connor?
The only difference is we had those under imply, so that's one difference for the.
Okay, yeah, I saw like recon to identify enemy avenues of approach and engagement area dev, essentially. What else do we have from implied tasks that were not already discussed? So they put placing obstacles as implied. Be prepared to transition to, I think you meant the offense. Okay, what else?
We had reversals on ours as an implied task.
Okay, goes back to some of our characteristics of the defense, which we'll talk about next. All right. Let's transition to group 3. Are you 3?
We're 3 over here.
Okay. Just real quick, can you just talk us through what we haven't done? We haven't done mission yet. Let's do mission next.
Our mission is Task Force 136, Infantry Defends, Key Terrain, Highway 9 and 13. South of Fieldville, no later than 24 hours to retain control of the mobility corridor to enable the ABCT to transition to the offense.
Okay. Tactical task, defend. Can you draw that for me? Well, hold on. Let's tease this out first. Is defend a tactical task? No. So what can we do instead of defend? So you kind of have it. You have retained control. So I'd argue you probably spin this to Task Force 136 retains control of in order to enable, right? What do you guys have that's similar or different? Go ahead, Zach, sorry, and then we'll come over here.
Just like last week when we had the discussion about you attack to do something.
Yep.
Here for us we did defend to retain key terrain.
Defend to retain.
I would pair it with like a form of the defense. So Task Force 136 conducts an area defense in order to retain key terrain.
Okay.
Just makes it a little bit more clear for the
Okay. What did you have? Sorry.
We put controls.
Controls. Why controls?
So that, one, we maintain physical influence of the mobility corridor, and also some more posture to then do the pull.
Okay. Anybody have anything different? What do we have for characteristics? The most important characteristics. I heard you guys joking about we could just list them all, but then we didn't have any important. What do you guys got? Right over here.
The mass and concentration, sorry. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I got turned around. So we looked at disruption and then mass and concentration as the 2 most important. They're kind of intertwined because we're going to have to put up obstacles and set up for CAS, but also we need to have combat power at the same time, concentrated at a decisive point to disrupt the.
Okay. So you listed 4, but if you had to prioritize 2 of the 4, you went with disruption and then mass and concentration. Okay. What do you guys have that's different?
We did preparation and disruption, sir.
Preparation and disruption. Why preparation?
To give us time for priorities when we're putting in the obstacles. We have 2 fixed obstacles we're employing.
survivability measures.
So I think the only reason I didn't say preparation because it's important is just how short the time is and how long it's going to take to move assets. And I've just seen defenses take a long time to set up.
Okay. Anybody want to touch on any of that? Connor?
We thought a little bit different. The 24 hours we actually viewed as better than, we're looking at like, is this a hasty defense or is it more deliberate? So it seems like it was more on the short end of deliberate versus the hasty. So that's why we have preparation as number one.
So you guys are saying different things almost, right? You said, and I'm not saying this is not saying we're wrong. You went less with preparation because you didn't have time. You went more focused on preparation because we don't have the time. Okay, I misunderstood you. Okay. So like the prioritization of your preparation. Okay. All right, Zach?
Yeah, continuing along that, like the conversation right now is focused on those obstacles and like what the engineers are doing as part of preparation. But there's so much more that the maneuver forces are doing to rehearse. They're rehearsing the enemy coming into their engagement area. They have to rehearse the R-pull of their scouts back through their front lines. They have to rehearse their bounding back or transitioning to subsequent and alternate battle positions. There's so many other aspects of rehearsals that go into engagement area development that's why I put preparation as the number one.
Okay.
You run through all those rehearsals, you have nobody to report.
Right.
It's true, but also, I think to Zach's point, if you're setting up obstacles and you don't rehearse how you're going to defend those obstacles, are you just putting out something that they're just going to drive around? Or, I mean, the fires officers, do we need to rehearse the fires plan for this as well, more than likely, for those obstacles? Because, again, you put out an obstacle, what do you have to have on it? You have to have some type of observation on top of it. If you put out an obstacle and there's nothing there to observe or engage or have any type of effect there, then it's worthless to you. Because the enemy can just show up, realize that no one's there, cut through and move on, right? And so part of that is part of the rehearsals. I see what you're saying. If I focus too much on my rehearsals and my preparation, then no one's actually building obstacles, right? So it's a balance. You got to strike a balance with it. Again, it goes back to that 1/3, 2/3. And I would argue that everybody's going to have a different type of rehearsal. Your R&S teams are going to be doing something completely different than your engineers, than your main battle area, than your sustainers, et cetera. Okay? Anything else?
Why we have different levels of rehearsals. Like you can do key leader rehearsals or things like that.
Okay.
So you can have people doing different priorities of work, getting ready for the defense.
Sure.
You can still execute rehearsals.
Different levels of rehearsal. So it doesn't probably mean like, okay, let's all come back and let's do a quick car. Everybody just move back to the back and let's do a quick car. That's a good point. And then also something that you guys will have to really kind of work hard at is dispersed rehearsals, right? Because you guys are not going to all be at one spot in LISCO. It's going to be very difficult to do that. So how do I do rehearsals digitally? How do I do them over FM? How do I do them from different locations? All right, let's kind of move over here now. Anything else that we did not hit? Characteristics. I got preparation, disruption. I've seen a few flexibility. And you guys have depth. So Lucas or someone, excuse me, in this group, talk to us about flexibility, why that would be important. Connor?
Yeah, so we have flexibility up there primarily because of in the paragraph how it talks about how we can allocate primary and alternate battle positions, so essentially allocating those resources efficiently to be able to anticipate enemy actions. So the flexibility piece is really tied to the battle positions.
Yep. And really it becomes a problem for you guys because you have multiple mobility corridors as well, right? And so really, flexibility to me is like the enemy gets a vote. If the enemy decides to go along a route that you didn't necessarily plan for, your plan has to be flexible in order to impact that. Depth on this group?
So depth enables disruption in this case. If you're attacking the enemy in depth, you're denying them their ability to do reconnaissance. You're also attriting them in their main battle area, so they're attacking you piecemeal, which is a disruption technique. And then you're also hitting them deep, desynchronizing their operation by killing their C2 nodes, denying them the ability to mass indirect fire. So the depth enables it different.
Okay. What types and variations of defense did we employ over here?
Ours is defense in depth, so area defense.
Area defense. Looks like an area over here as well.
Yeah, we had
Area defense. Did anybody do a mobile? Why not a mobile?
Because you're giving up the terrain that you've been tasked to retain.
Okay.
You've got adjacent units that you're trying to lock in with. You don't want to allow any sort of seam to develop.
What's the major difference between area defense and a mobile defense? Area is focused on terrain. Mobile is focused on defeating the enemy. Okay. I would also argue maybe based on the type of terrain that you're in, it may be difficult to employ a mobile defense given the space. We could probably argue both back and forth about that one as well. But okay, so we went with area defense based on the commander's intent, the commander's guidance of retaining specific terrain. So we're area defense focused. Okay, and then if we dive deeper into that, are we perimeter? Why not? Yeah, we're not a 360, right? Are we reverse slope? No. Are we a linear obstacle? We're probably closer to that based on the terrain, but area defense in general, okay? Remember, those are the different, if you bury into the area defense, you've got defense of a linear obstacle, you've got perimeter defense, and you have reverse slope, okay? But ultimately, area defense, we are terrain focused. Transitions. What do we got for transitions? Mohammed?
Defensive to offensive.
Okay, so yeah, transition back to the offense. Did everybody at least have that in some way, shape, or form? Okay, because ultimately you're trying to F-pull a unit and help the larger unit get back on the offense, right? And when we talk purposes of defense, which we'll kind of cover here in a second as well, like a quick refresher from your reading, did you notice the theme? It's all about getting back into the offense in some way, shape, or form, okay? Counter recon, am I reading the right thing for you guys? Yeah, potential transitions. Counter recon, defense to offense, the F-pull is a transition. Okay, what else? What do we have? Yeah, yes ma'am. Commitment of your own reserve? Okay. Yep, Dan?
Once the scouts complete or reach their disengagement criteria from the security area, they're going to do a hard pull through the main battle area.
Okay. What can they be doing for you while they're out there as well, maybe? What'd you say? Delay, maybe. It depends on the size of the formation, depends on the enemy, but you're already limited on time. And so inside of your area defense, have you accounted for, like, maybe I want my RNS to do a little bit of a delay as they're moving back before you get the enemy back into the main battle area, right? Something to think about. E?
I also put in my very
In your extensive experience?
In my legal experience, sir. I also put up there, in the case of failure or overwhelm, that's what that's supposed to be, then delay or retrograde.
Okay. So going back to, like, maybe I've got to do some type of retrograde operation in the event that we fail. We already kind of had an issue where we were successful, but you read in the scenario that the enemy had a significant impact on our sustainment and fires. And so now that's why we're moving into this kind of hasty defense to hold what we got before we're prepared to come back in. So if we're not successful, potential transition, obviously we don't want to do that, okay? But what are our retrograde options? Withdrawal, delay, retirement. Do you think you're going to do a retirement here? Why not? You're in a fight, right? Retirement is like I'm getting away from the enemy. I'm not in any type of contact. Can I withdraw under contact? Can I withdraw not out of contact? Or not in contact, excuse me. Yes, okay. And then delay. We talked about delay, trading space for time, right? Okay. You guys had F-pull. Okay. And lastly, warfighting functions. Did we talk about anything key you want to highlight here from your groups? What do we got on this side? What do we got from this board? Warfighting function-wise. Yeah, go ahead.
Super fires is tying your obstacles with maneuver. So like if you have turn obstacles, you're enhancing that turn. So you're putting them in a position where they have to turn and get out of where that obstacle is. And then a second one in this, due to the what they said in the scenario of their fires assets being plussed up, want to get a good counter firefight planned out. So that's radar zones, having all your counter fire shooters and your counter fire battle drilling sussed out prior to.
What do we have over here? Go ahead, John.
For support, we started with class 4, then class 5, and then class 3. Even though it's an armor brigade, we focus more on getting the defensive equipment forward, and then we'll get the fuel for them there.
Okay. Probably goes back to our discussion earlier about the prioritization of our preparation. It's a good point. Maybe I want my class 4 up front first. Yeah, Rick?
For C2, you're looking at your task board, really focused on how you're going to generate that reserve, where you're going to put your top, whether you're going to use attack, are you going to put out retrans, and where is it going to go?
Okay. From your own, like, I don't need an answer. You can raise your hand, I guess. From your own specific warfighting function, were you thinking about what would I provide to this and why it would be important to push that up into the staff, right? Is everybody seeing why we do it by warfighting function and how it can enable the specific operations, order, offense, defense, etc.? Okay. All right, so real quick, in your slide deck, you've got these already before we go on break. So what's the purpose of a defense? Why do we do it? Go ahead. Retain key terrain. Or really it says decisive terrain, deny an area vital to the enemy. What's the overall, like, overarching purpose before that, though? Essentially, yeah, I want to get back to the offense. I want to create conditions to get back to the offense. So in this case, it's a perfect example of I moved into an attack, I moved into a hasty defense, conditions aren't quite set, I need to retain specific terrain to enable my entire echelon to move back into the offense, okay? What else do we have in there? What's the third one? Okay, attrit or fix the enemy force as a prelude to what? To get back on the offense, okay? Counter enemy action. Accept risk. What does it talk about accepting risk?
You accept risk in one area to create offensive opportunities in another.
Okay, so if I accept risk here and I recognize that I'm no longer in the offense, but if I can accept some risk here, conduct a hasty defense, cause the enemy to maybe mass and concentrate in a specific area, it may open up an opportunity to conduct an offensive operation elsewhere, okay? And then the last one, increase enemy vulnerabilities. And again, this goes back to what we talked about. We force them to concentrate. That enables us to do an operation elsewhere. Any thoughts on purposes of the defense? We talked a couple of the characteristics of the defense. What did we not talk? Security. What do we have out front? And we'll talk about this when I start. So I have scouts, cav, right? Depending on the type of formation. If we're an ABCT, I got a cav unit that can do that, right? It's reconnaissance and security operations, which I know we haven't had that class yet. We'll do it on Friday. But I can do recon, I can do security, and we'll talk about the differences between the two of them, okay? So we got security. That's important. What else do we have? Maneuver. How come we probably didn't talk too much about maneuver on this one? That may be part of it, right? A mobile defense obviously is going to require a lot more maneuver because you got that striking force that you need to incorporate, okay? And again, a mobile defense, I'm focused on the enemy. Area defense, focus on my area, focus on my terrain. Mobile defense, use my mobility to go attack the enemy and prevent them from achieving certain gains. Okay, so one is terrain-based, one is enemy-based. I think we talked a little bit about mass concentration. We talked some depth. What can depth also provide to us? I think Eric might have brought some depth earlier, but what else can depth help us do in any type of defensive operation? Say that again, Mohammed. Prepare for a counterattack. Rick?
It's maintaining distribution, so you're not opening yourself up to fires as much.
Okay, so maybe I don't want to be decisively engaged in one specific area. Eric and then Connor?
Even here, you can have your subsequent battle positions that you maneuver, that you bound back to without sacrificing the control of the terrain. So if you just put your people on line, then you just lack that depth, and then you allow the enemy to penetrate you, and they're in there over your lines.
When you create depth, what are you forcing the enemy to do? Like, let's look at it from a ground perspective. with enabled by like fires or maybe other effects. If you're creating depth, what am I doing? So Eric's example is if I just put everybody online, I put them all right here, I'm not getting any type of effect on the enemy until they get there, right? What am I doing as I extend this out this way? What am I forcing the enemy to do all the way up here?
Fight through multiple layers.
They're fighting through some layers.
They change from movement to maneuver.
Maybe I force them to move from a movement formation into a maneuver formation earlier than they anticipated. It goes back to as well, it enables your disruption. So we talked about the reason we have a deep area, a close area, and a rear area. The more depth that you have, the more conditions that your higher echelon can set for you before it gets to the close area, okay? So everybody see why depth is important here. Maybe I can delay inside of my own formation. Maybe I can have multiple obstacles. I can do subsequent battle positions, supplementary battle positions to help the sequencing of my operation. So it comes back to space and timing as well. We talked preparation. And I think we already talked flexibility, disruption. And then area defense, mobile defense, and retrograde. Any questions or thing that doesn't make sense to you based on what you guys read last night for those options? If you think of something after we come back on break, we can discuss those as well, okay? All right, so I have 9:20. Let's take 10. Please be back at 9:30. About that. All right, take your seats. What'd you say? Sorry.
Yes. There we go.
You want to go to every game? You want to go to all 7 games? Yeah.
Next week.
Where? Who's your team?
Seattle Mariners.
No.
They're up 2-0 right now.
Who are we missing? Missing Darren, Linda. Okay, we got a couple. John, did you go to Norwich?
I did.
Wait, graduate in 14, 15? Okay. I did. For my bachelor's degree. I was not in the Corps. I was one of those weird guys that did ECP school, and then I was there, so I was a lieutenant running around helping with labs and stuff. But I know, nobody liked me. I thought I was nice to them. But nobody liked me. I think they didn't like, you guys didn't like me because I was wearing shorts and flip-flops to class, and you guys were all stuck in your uniform still. And then I put on a uniform. You're like, you're going to listen to this kid? He's younger than me? I'm like, yeah, so all the sergeants major. Get over it. But yeah, I had a good time. It was a good time. I was up there for 2 years. Very what? Yeah. Yep. I spent some time on Payne Mountain. There's a reason it's called that. I'm going to start in like 30 seconds. All right. Welcome back. So again, quickly review. We already kind of talked some of these things. Haven't put this up in a little bit, so I want to refresh your memory of the MDO logic chart and how we can bring all these things down to this level, respecting the principles of war, the tenets of operations, those imperatives, which are things you must do, and then how that leads back down to offense, defense, RNS, et cetera, which at this point now we are doing defensive operations. We went over this already, just briefly. The purposes, those characteristics, and then a little bit of the defense taxonomy, which is really the 3 different types, right? Your area defense, your mobile defense, and then your retrograde, and the different types of variations in there. Any questions on those before we continue? And I had a couple good discussions on the break, so if there's something that doesn't make sense to you, come grab me. Anything for the group? Okay? So again, we talked about doctrinal template. So if we kind of go back, and we saw this already when we talked about the offense in Charlie 406. But again, the division frontage, we talked about a division deep area and how we're trying to set conditions For the division's close area, which is where who operates? The brigades, okay? So again, I think it was Joe that had the analogy of it's like a Russian, what did you call it? Russian nesting doll, right? So again, division frontages, those close areas. So this is just a way, and it's a template. You're not going to find a specific terrain area that's going to fit this appropriately, right? But this kind of helps you see in size and scope how large these formations are conducting these types of operations, okay? And we talk about physical depth, but we can also create depth with the types of effects that we can have as well. And then the nesting of those areas inside of that operation. So in terms of time, space, and purpose, again, it's not necessarily a physical location, but how do I create where these operations are occurring? So shaping future close operations, as well as protecting rear operations, because if the enemy is targeting us with long-range fires into our support area, that would be why it would be important for us to have significant deep operations to protect our rear area. Close operations is where you actually employ, maneuver, and fires. Close with and destroy the enemy. And then our rear is how do I maintain a specific tempo? How do I extend operational reach with my sustainment? Right? How do I continue to enable protection of key assets and increase survivability? And then the support area itself, your DSA or your CSA or your BSA, right, depending on the echelon, the sustainment and the command and control functions. So there's a quick review from 401 and 406. Extended deep operations, I think this was briefly touched on last week, where we're talking about things that are typically outside of the AO for a core division, and we can nominate specific things up to the joint force for that. So we're requesting effects. This is where kind of like Dan's realm comes into this some, right? Or I would argue even some of our space, SEMA, et cetera, that we're reaching out. We're asking for specific things that are going to have an effect on enemy offensive operations. Deep operations, attrit. So I'm actually looking to destroy certain things or reduce capacity or capability. Isolate them from a command and control perspective maybe. Disrupt them, maybe push them into from a movement to a maneuver formation earlier, or disorganize them in general. Like how do I prevent them from conducting the type of operation that they want to conduct, okay? And then again, we're synchronizing those deep operations, knowing that we're trying to set conditions for our subordinates. Close operations, so one thing that we want to talk about is when you guys set this up for a defense, you'll have a security area and you'll have a main battle area. That will help you synchronize things within time and space and within the types of effects that you have so you can defeat an enemy force using depth, okay? So again, we'll talk the differences between reconnaissance and security on Friday. But we look at security area operations. I'm looking to protect that main battle area and prevent surprise on that location, okay? I'm also providing some early warning. And I'm also going to destroy enemy reconnaissance assets. What are we talking about when we get into destroying enemy recon? Like what fight are we talking about? Dan? Yeah, it's your recon, counter-recon fight, okay? Why would it be important to have security area operations based on the homework that we had last night? Why do I need this? Yeah, Jake.
The enemy from determining what your obstacle and survivability position effects are.
Okay. So he said prevent the enemy from identifying where my obstacles actually are at. Maybe it's also to increase some survivability of some key assets. What else? Sorry, Connor.
Kind of the recon and counter-recon fight essentially is each side trying to determine the course of action the other side took. So they can verify each other's course of action and then dictate their moves at that time.
Yeah. When you guys looked at the different types of battle positions, right, you're planning on maybe the enemy having one or two. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to go with avenue of approach number 1. My security force can verify if the enemy is going to use avenue of approach 1. And if they're not, that enables me to have some flexibility. If we go back to our characteristics of the defense, it enables me to have some flexibility to say, hey, they're not coming down AOA1. I need to shift over to the east to go to the other one, right? What else do we have from a security perspective?
It denies them characteristics of the offense. So they, like you said, surprise search, but it causes them to maybe deploy early, which degrades their tempo, and potentially they concentrate on the wrong force as well.
Okay, that's a good point. I think sometimes we have the O'Vannon doctrine or the PLA doctrine, okay? But sometimes I need you guys to just think in your own terms. If you were going to fight this plan from an enemy perspective, how would you do it? And then you can go back and incorporate some of the things that we expect from our enemy forces based on their own doctrine. But, you know, if an infantryman tells the two, hey, this is exactly how I would fight this with Brads, right? If an armor officer is like, this is how I would employ tanks and Brads in this type of scenario, based on the terrain, based on the size of formation I have, based on the assets that I have, there's nothing wrong with that. And so if we can spin this back and say, if we wouldn't want to be surprised, if we wouldn't want the enemy to concentrate forces on us, if we want to limit their tempo, if we want to make sure that they don't have an audacious plan against us, that's a good way to kind of look at it as well. And the security force may be able to prevent some of that as well. Any other comments? Providing early warning. I think we also talked about delaying, right? Remember that security force, even though they're not specifically the defense and they're not going to do like their own retrograde operation, but in a sense they're helping delay that force and helping you continue to set conditions in the close area. So we've got the deep area, really setting conditions from a much higher level, an echelon before it gets to you. And then let's pick them apart a little bit more. Let's delay them. Let's continue to now employ my own organic fires, my own organic effects. Maybe I've got some specific things that have been allocated to me, like some casts. Maybe I've got some attack aviation that I can do some deep attacks forward of that security area as well. And let's continue to delay the force and attrit them, pick them apart before they even get down to the main battle area, okay? So that's part of it as well. So it's a little bit of recon, counter-recon fight, get some early warning, get a better read on what the enemy is doing, but also like how do I make sure that I'm setting conditions myself as well, okay? You may not be able to do that every time. You may not be able to do that with the force that you have, but it should be a planning consideration that you're considering. Anything else? Okay, so what's the difference between that and then my main battle area? What's the main battle area that we got from our reading as well?
Where you put the bulk of your combat power, that's where you engage with direct and indirect fires maneuver.
Okay, so that's where I'm actually going to get into that firefight, right? With my tanks, my Brads. That's where my EA dev is occurring. That's where I'm blocking. That's where I'm employing turning obstacles, fixing obstacles, right? What else? Think of it from a mobile defense perspective. What's happening in this main battle area? Destroying the enemy? Fixing the enemy? I'm actually conducting that strike force is actually going to do that spoiling attack or that counterattack inside the main battle area. Anything else? Notice how it says, use the terrain to our advantage. Restrictive terrain favors an area defense, orient on key terrain and avenues of approach. Open, less restrictive terrain usually favors a mobile defense. Kind of self-explanatory, but why? Like, what are we showing here? I'm kind of using this homework example, but why do you, besides the fact that the commander said you need to retain something here, why would you maybe not want to employ a mobile defense in this scenario?
You might only have one way to execute the striking.
Okay.
There might only be one approach.
Yeah, and if I was planning this from an enemy perspective, if I was going to say, hey, I see all these formations and I recognize that there's going to be a counterattack more than likely coming, I may plan for that. If there's only one way to execute it, you may not want to. I saw some other hands. What else? Joe?
The terrain grants you, if you have defensive positions in terrain, it grants you an advantage that you lose when you start to move.
Okay. Good point. And again, it may go back to like what's your actual mission? What's your broader purpose? If your broader purpose is to like destroy the enemy and have a significant impact, then I want to let the enemy come in so I can set conditions for how and when I want to attrit that force. But if I'm told to hold what I got, then I need to make sure that I have my mutually supporting positions to be able to do that and retain that key terrain. Any other thoughts before we continue on? Any questions on deep, close, area versus mobile? Okay, and then reserve. Size, composition, location. Do we give the reserve a mission? No. Give them planning priorities. And again, I would argue, don't just give them a planning priority of, if it hitteth the fanneth, this is where you will go. You guys got to be able to recognize that that reserve can exploit success as well. And that should be the primary thing. Nobody makes a plan thinking like, oh, we are going to get crushed here. And that's, thankfully, I've got a reserve to be able, like, you guys don't plan that way. You plan to say, this is where I'm going to have effects on the enemy. So don't plan your reserve the same way, okay? Exploit success with them first. Then include in there if we're having a significant issue or if I need to disrupt a counterattack from the enemy, etc. Timing is critical. This kind of goes back to if I'm delaying the enemy and I want to bring them into a specific location, I don't want to commit the enemy for, I don't want to commit the counterattack from that reserve too early. I also don't want to commit it too late, okay? So it goes back to our planning of how we want to employ this force. Should be task organized appropriately. Once you commit a reserve, you've got to start doing what? You got to find another one, okay? Because ultimately now you have lost the capability to exploit success somewhere else or be prepared to prevent catastrophic failure in a different portion. Thoughts on the reserve? And what size do we typically want to try and go for with a reserve? 2 levels down if possible, okay? Our rear area operations, maintain freedom of action, divert combat power from other priorities, okay? Because we got to weigh the need. And then I'm trying to limit enemy detection in there as well. We talked about survivability and protection. I need to make sure that I can harden specific nodes, counter enemy attacks. If you've bypassed forces or other forces have bypassed you, like even in your defensive operation, you may have some like bypass criteria. I'm not too concerned about those 2 dismounted infantrymen making it past or whatever, right? Maybe I'm not so much concerned about it. But what can that cause later on? Probably can cause some impacts to my rear area, can cause some impacts to my MSRs, ASRs, and things like that. So we have to keep that in mind, and you have to make it a consideration. I think this is a good format here to show you, hey, if the extended deep, things that I can't reach out and touch organically myself, not even my core, my division, I'm looking for some joint effects out here. My core deep, things that I can affect with core operations that I didn't have to nominate to the joint force to do. But I've got some specific long-range fires. I got some targets. I got my purple kill box. I'm introducing some AI, okay? And I'm targeting some specific things out in that core deep area. Gets back to the core close area. The core close area is where the division is going to operate. And inside of that, the division is, again, setting conditions forward to enable that security area in the division close. I've got my CAV element forward conducting security operations, and then my main battle area where that engagement area development has occurred. I've got those brigade combat teams ready to engage those elements there, and then the reserve supported by the core rear helping me to enable that operation. So I think that's a very good graphic to show you in time and space if we're doing defensive operations to employ all of the different frameworks in there. Any questions on that? Any thoughts? Okay. Planning considerations. This came up in our homework, and it's kind of a no-brainer, right? A defense is more effective when you have time to plan and prepare defensive positions. Lack of preparation may cause a commander to maintain a larger than normal reserve. Why do you think that is? Okay, so it goes back to the characteristics of the defense. If I don't know enough about the enemy and I haven't had enough time, then I may be weighting my reserve element a little bit more to make sure that it can be successful. What else? I saw another hand, unless Brian stole your thunder. Yeah, Bratton.
If you do those rehearsals, that's where you would identify where you need to array your combat power. So instead of having an excess reserve, you identify that that company actually needs to cover previous or identify dead space somewhere else.
Okay. You brought up in rehearsals. Where else can I probably identify this? Someone said mission analysis. We're closer. Yeah, wargaming. Who said wargaming? I think wargaming because ultimately as you're going through the operation, you're going to find the gaps in your swing. And you're going to realize, like, maybe I don't have enough combat power allocated to this unit, and I need to figure out a different way to do it. Okay? But yeah, when I'm analyzing the mission, when I'm developing my COA, that's some key considerations there. Okay? What are the thoughts that you've got up that you see up there you want to tease out, or questions? What if I don't have enough time? What do I do? Who's ever had enough time to really set in a defense in an operation? Like you were given just days and days to set up a. So what are we doing then? What if we don't have enough time, Zach?
Well, I was in a defense at a CTC where I did have basically unlimited time.
Okay.
We fought through. It was our second battle period during my 3CR rotation. We had so much time that we decided to create a blocking obstacle across the entire central corridor. The engineers just did shifts on the same dozers.
Okay.
And they worked for like 3 days straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
And we did a lot of preparation.
Okay.
At that time. Not just like the engineers doing the obstacle placement, but like cars at every level, how to like use the counterattack at every battalion.
Would you argue that you still had to prioritize certain things though?
Yes.
Or did you just, let's do that next? Like, did you plan out how you were going to do things?
We did. Well, especially like at hires level, they had to prioritize certain things. I think at our level down at the company, you were kind of able to do everything that you needed to do. Minus maybe digging every single individual fighting position, but the terrain that we were on didn't necessitate it. So.
Okay. Who has the complete opposite? They had like very little time to do a defense. Lucas?
Yeah.
So how did your team go about this?
Well, ultimately, we had to prioritize whether we were going to dig in our fighting positions or focus on the obstacle belt, which there just wasn't enough time for both. And so by going through MDMP and determining where the decisive point of the operation was, we determined that we had to prioritize the turning obstacle rather than our defensive positions, because getting that turn was critical to get them into our engagement area.
Okay.
So, yeah, we absolutely have to prioritize.
So it sounds to me like you were utilizing your analysis that you did on both the terrain and what you expected the enemy to do, helped you to kind of prioritize how you would plan out based on the limited time that you have. Okay. Any other thoughts? I think obviously, right, if you have more time to plan, right, then you can synchronize this a little bit better, but it's not always going to happen. So some C2 we talked about earlier. Again, is C2 just the signal and the comms? No. Okay, graphic control measures. How do I assign specific boundaries? How do I make sure that I am echeloning my fires and my FSCMs appropriately? Those control measures are going to impact the ground. So that comes back to the C2 function. How do I understand the need to shift supporting efforts? So again, if we're doing some type of delay, potentially, you may have one element that's the main effort here, and then as they conduct their delay operations or as they can continue to move back, somebody else is supporting them, and then they're going to shift. So that's an important part of the defense also, is ensuring that I see how I can distribute the forces appropriately and understand like who's in support now. You're going to have to shift fires. You may have to shift sustainment, especially if you're in a long, drawn-out defense that's taking a day or two or something like that. Things are going to shift often, okay? So it's going to be important for C2. A few of you guys brought up task org, rapidly relocating CPs. We had a conversation with Rick about like the placement of the talk and the retrans in order to enable some of your protection of your assets, but also maintain communications. So there's a few different things to think about. Anybody else have anything they want to highlight from a C2 perspective of what you focus on when conducting defensive planning? Bueller,
where does
John?
the battalion commander want to be?
Okay.
Where would you generally Where are you going to put them? Hey, this is my primary EA. I'm going to position myself forward there and then put like my exo somewhere else.
Yep.
Or so you just.
It's a good point. I mean, typically commanders want to go where the most friction is at. So am I going to where that friction is at, or am I going to where I think the main effort is? So there's a couple different things there. I think every commander is going to have a different take on that. But yeah, it's a difference between where my talk is versus where my tack is. Okay, Rick?
Yeah, when you're looking at that, if you're going to deploy a tack, now you can start to look at how necessary is it for my talk to be fully able to communicate with everybody forward, or do I want to focus the talk being able to definitively communicate with brigade, like my CTCP, to push assets forward and let the tack focus primarily on the fight, making sure I maintain comms with the tack.
Good. Good point. Zach?
Changing task organization is probably one that we haven't hit on a lot. And as I look around everyone's boards, no one changed it from Bradley's and tank companies to combined arms companies to integrate those weapon systems. And it's not just the ABCT where you can do that. You can integrate, previously heavy weapons companies with light infantry companies to give them better weapons capabilities. So there's a whole bunch of ways that we can do task organization to fit the mission to create those multiple problem sets.
So we're not doing AGADAP in here right now, right? Because we're not doing full-blown MDMP. But yeah, it's very important that we understand the task organization. You don't have to take this one-size-fits-all battalion and use it that exact way. If you think there's a way like, I need to plus this up with specific capability because of urban terrain or because of open terrain or because this is where I need to, this is the largest portion of my engagement area, so I want all tanks in here, whatever the case may be, right? It is important to consider that as well, that task organization, and who's in charge of that as well, okay? Anything else you want to highlight for C2? Okay, what about movement maneuver? Thoughts on movement maneuver? Doesn't have to be from a maneuverist. What are some things that we need to think about in the defense?
Engagement area development.
Okay.
It's not just the enemy. You can't just wish the enemy into your engagement area. You have to consciously craft and draft your both tied into terrain, your obstacles to actually get them into the engagement area how you want them. So I think too many times I've seen defense where like commanders will just wish like, oh, we're gonna kill him here. And it's like, well, how did you get them there?
Yeah.
So
you got to look at it from the enemy perspective, from a movement maneuver as well, right? You can say engagement area here, and this is where we're going to kill them. But if they don't even ever get there because they've decided to do something different, then that can be a problem. Okay. What else?
Your selection, kind of tying in with that, selection of alternate and subsequent battle positions, pretty critical, and then making sure you actually rehearse moving between them, because I've definitely seen where it's built, but nobody's actually driven from point A to point B, and it turns into just like, a cluster.
Okay. I saw a group had mutual support on one of their boards. I don't remember who that was, but why do we need to consider mutual support?
In this scenario, because of the distance, you have the ability to create interlocking sectors of fire across the mobility corridors to achieve that mass and concentration.
Okay. Counter mobility versus mobility. Where are my engineers in the room? What are we talking about when we talk counter mobility and mobility from a maneuver perspective in the defense?
Whatever obstacles you create might become obstacles for you on the counterattack.
Yeah. If we know we're going to transition into the offense, how do I make sure that I can have a lane potentially open, maybe, okay? Why do I need to have mobility in the defense as well? Yeah, if we talked about this mutual support, we talked about reallocating forces, supporting those different supporting efforts, maybe sustainers, right? All those MSRs and ASRs, those lines of communication that you've got behind the defense are super important also. If you only focus on the counter mobility piece, you may have a significant impact on the enemy. But if you don't create your own mobility behind that, then in the case of like a mobile defense, if you don't create some type of mobility for that striking force, they may not ever even get to the point where they need to be because everything's so bogged down or the terrain doesn't afford them the opportunity, et cetera, okay? Sustainment, anything? Sustainment into movement maneuver? What are your thoughts? There's like 6 of you in here. I'm not good at math. There might be 8 of you in here. Yes, sir.
I mean, for this sustainment piece, going back to what John was talking about, well, first we've got to understand the priorities, right? Where we are in the defensive operation, where we are in the transition, because we might have to change our priorities, right? We might, if we're talking movement and maneuver, we might have to transition now to fuel as the main priority as we work through these different shaping operations. But that's being tied in from the beginning, right? In the planning phase of all of this to understand where we are and how we can easily transition. Because yes, we're an ADCT, but if we're on the defense, by doctrine, we're actually burning more fuel. But those that support it and understand that class 4 is more priority because it's a vehicle station.
Okay. Makes sense? Yep.
I guess it goes to modes and nodes too, like where are we going to conduct this resupply? Is it going to be a terrain feature back? Are we going to go forward? Are they going to have to come back to us? How it happens in that way too is understanding their move and maneuver. Are their tanks already in their fighting position? Are they going to come out? How are we?
Yeah, I've seen that. Like you got to strike a balance there of not even just like maybe vehicle maintenance as well. How are you pulling those vehicles off? How many of you pulling off at a time to come back and do those, et cetera? Dan?
I think it makes it difficult. It's not necessarily from the readings, but the sustainers typically have to be in operation head. So you'll still be in the offense, and sustainers need to be preparing for the defense in order to get the right materials in place at the right time, and vice versa. When you're going to resume the offense, because of all the modes and nodes and where everything is held, like that stuff needs to start moving earlier than.
Yeah, like transitioning back to the offense. Are we going to have to do a ROM at that point? Like, there's a couple different things we got to consider there. Okay. All right. I don't know if I can talk too much about this slide, so I'm going to need some help. What do I need to think of intel-wise? Defensive planning considerations. We talked a little bit already about it, but like, what am I trying to? What's the most important thing about this? Well, not the most important. There's one thing that I think is pretty important, but Joe?
Figuring out where the enemy's coming from, what their main effort is.
And what, like, tease it out. Why do I think that's important here? What's the difference between being on the offense versus being on the defense? Say it? Yeah, the initiative, right? So the enemy has the initiative. So the intel bubbas have really got to help. It goes back to what Joe talked about. Where are they actually coming from? How are they going to employ their offense is super important because they have the initiative at this point. And if I'm caught on my heels and I don't understand that appropriately, then it's going to impact my ability to do the defense in general.
So another point I was going to say is awareness of their collection efforts, so figuring out how you're going to either camouflage your units or deceive them in some way so that they can't sufficiently collect on you.
Yep. You're in the defense. You're stuck, right? You're static. So the enemy is going to be able to collect on you probably a little bit better than if you were moving. If you were continuously on the move, continuously, doing movement maneuver operations, then they've got to shift things as well. But if they know where you're at, then yeah, their ability to collect on you just increased as well. Okay. Talked intentions. Again, we go back into that R&S fight that's forward. We've got to identify the early identification of the main effort. So even if we say, okay, we've got these 2 different avenues of approach, and we expect them to use both of them, but we think this one's the primary, why do I need to understand where the enemy's main effort is at? What characteristic of the defense is going to help me the most when I understand the enemy's main effort, if I can find it? Part of it? That's okay. I would just say, I would say mass and concentration as well. I can disrupt them initially before they get there, but if I understand where that main effort is at, then I know, okay, this is where I need to mass and concentrate within my engagement area development, right? See the enemy is critical, obviously. Execution of their information collection synchronization plans. Who enables this IC synchronization plan? Everyone, not just the 2. Why? No. Stop it.
Because they're doing a systems analysis on us just like we are on them.
Sure.
They're identifying our protection assets in the form of survivability being put in. They're identifying our M2 in the form of our countermobility being put in and where our combat power is being built. They're seeing our sustainment nodes, what do they look like, are they vulnerable? And they're doing that system analysis on us just like we're doing.
So let's pull that out, right? If we're on the offense, what do I need more of in the offense? gas, fuel, right? Petroleum. So if I go to Justin and I say, hey, we're in the defense, what do I maybe want to know from Justin for my IC collection plan? Enemy what? Enemy fuel farms, maybe. Maybe where their ammunition points are at, right? If I can have a significant impact on their sustainment functions from an IC plan, then I can target those things, okay? So now let's go protection. Do we have an ADA officer? No. Bummer. Okay. MPs. They're protecting specific things, right?
They're in the defense, critical assets, probably counter-battery, like the radars.
Okay.
Maybe some of the PAAs themselves, just depends. But sustainment in this phase might not be as big of a priority.
So you brought, it's a good segue. Fires, I want to know where their PAAs are going to be. I want to know where those radars are going to be. So I guess my point is every warfighting function can help enable this. I know we've talked about it before, but again, flip it back. If you were the enemy and you were going to employ your warfighting function in the offense, then how would you think about defending against that from a collection standpoint on the defense? Okay. So again, don't get wrapped up into, I have no idea what I would provide to the intelligence collection plan as a sustainer or protector or from a C2 perspective. Like, where do they put their C2 nodes? Where would they put their retrans? How would they conduct their own movement maneuver of their TAC and their CP, et cetera, right? Joe, did you have something that we didn't, did I steal your thunder a little bit? No? Okay. Fires? I know we have at least 2 fires in the room, and maybe some old fires in the room.
I think of multi-domain. So what are their EW capabilities, cyber? How are they influencing us? And maybe they're influencing the civilian population in Fieldville to provide early warning and detection, to tell them what we've been doing, and they're targeting us.
Okay.
So across the human.
All right. What else?
I could be missing it, but I don't think it says up there tie fires in with your obstacles, but that's like step 7 you have. So you can enhance an effect of an obstacle with a properly planned target. So in our case, in the corner, putting a linear target behind an enemy as they turn into that obstacle, they start to assess it, and you drop a linear target on them. You're going to force them into a quicker decision, which hopefully is getting them out of that corridor into your engagement area. So you can enhance those effects.
For me personally, I think what you're describing is that 4th bullet maybe. Synchronize, coordinate, distribute effects of indirect direct fire at the decisive time and place. That is an example of what you just talked about, right? Maybe not the decisive point, right? But yeah, how do I tie it in with my obstacles? How do I have a significant disrupting effect against enemy reconnaissance elements? Okay, any other thoughts?
Yeah, it just ties into, just like Intel ties into the rest of the warfighting functions. I think fires is the same. So like, if I'm looking at it from this perspective, like, hey, I'm taking my Intel picture. Now I can prioritize my fires assets to those things that Intel has brought up. For my movement and maneuver folks, just like you said, like, right, I want to channel guys down a certain pathway. I can use fires to help enable that. Same with protection. Figure out what high-value assets are out there that I can't really touch. Maybe ask for hire for any kind of CAS or AI to go out and get those. So I think it really melds with everything.
Okay. Joe?
Because the enemy's on the offense, timing plays a bigger role, because once we identify and get the information back to the fires, how far have they moved beyond the point at which we observe them? And so how do I sort of structure my different coordination?
Yeah, I think gets back into like graduate level. If you've turned TAIs, if you turn NAIs into TAIs, and the enemy is on the offense and they're moving, it's real graduate level to be prepared to put fires inside of that TAI exactly when you want to when the enemy arrives, right? But it's a technique to think about. Okay. Questions? Okay. Sustainment. I think you guys teased a lot of this out in your homework discussion as well. Again, class 5 and materials becomes a big important part of this, because if you're in the defense From a maneuver perspective, you're shooting more than you're driving. The sustainers may argue that they're driving more because they're going back and forth. Your fuel consumption as a sustainer may be significantly impacted during this, but from a maneuver perspective, like we're cooking on the class 5, right? What do you got?
One of the important things there, it talks about maintenance as far forward as possible, especially for our planning considerations, because if we have to retrograde equipment, then we're the ones actually moving it. So now, if we can keep it forward in the fight, especially in the defense, right, our mechanics can work on it while they're in those defensive positions.
Yeah.
But if we start pulling all this stuff back, it's not just the fuel consumption, it's when we transition to the offense, where's the BSA or DSA going to go at this point? And now we're pulling all of that equipment.
Even something as simple as recovery operations. Who's doing that? Are they doing self-recovery while they're actually in the fight? Is like, is it phased? Like, there's a lot of considerations there. So it's a good point you bring up about maintenance that far forward. What else?
I think what Dan was talking about is us thinking, you know, the next move ahead, if the bottom bullet pre-positioning supply. So if our SPO and our Brigade 4 are Johnny on the spot and have been talking to 3 and know that that's the next step, we're already getting those CCLs that we've talked about, whatever, and getting those to the FSC so that they're prepared to push that forward as soon as they say, all right, time to start building. Those CCLs are being pushed forward and are ready there, not coming from the USB at that point.
Okay, this is why though, like, you gotta have these FSCs. I know the logistical like footprint is not as big in the battalions, but you have that company commander and that XO who can, because oftentimes we see the maneuver fill the 4 position in the battalion, plugging in the experts from the FSC for these planning considerations, especially when we start talking transitioning into the offense, or, you know, how do we continue to provide support forward of whatever operation is going on.
Yep.
Because and I've seen a lot of really good maneuver people plan the sustainment piece of it, but if we're not plugged in, then we're actually supporting from behind.
And then, I mean, we talked about task org changes earlier as well, right? If you've got FSCs that are oriented on strikers, and we start to mix and match task orgs, and an FSC can't take care of an Abrams, now what have you, like, so yeah, the sustainers have got to be very mixed in with that as well. I think we talked about that last week, but I want to make sure that it's clear as well. Rick?
And how you do casualty evacuation, especially at the battalion level, can be tricky. Like, how far forward are you going to push your medevac assets, and where you're going to put your AXPs, and how much combat power is it then going to take to move those casualties from your battle position back to that AXP?
Okay. Forward surgical teams, Chris?
Yeah, for instance, normally during defense, that's when you are going to take the most casualties during defense. When I was an OCT at JRTC, this was always like a point of contention during the defense. We would never get personnel come to like the roll 2 or the roll 1, so expect like at the battalion level, you're going to have a lot of mass out. So what we do to mitigate this as a planning consideration, we'll push pre-position like platforms forward so that when everything is clear, we have an easier time evacuating personnel out. We also do, like for sustainment as far as like class 8, we'll do something called pushback. So we'll give you a remote robust like package forward because we know you're not going to get resupplying times.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
I think the biggest thing too, what Jonathan was talking about, the pre-positioned stocks and troop movement and convoy resupplies, I think that's one thing that sustainers need to be tied into as well, because not only are you pushing those forward so you can enable your units to kind of push back to that, but just knowing that you have to pick those things back up as the fight continues to move forward, so that can delay your ability to resupply forward if you go into the counter.
Okay. Good. All right, protection. Why is this one so important in the defense protection standpoint? Yeah, you're static. You're stuck. Well, I mean, in some senses you're stuck, right? You may want to be there, but still, you're static. So your survivability becomes a big problem. It also may depend on where you're located in terms of the terrain, like how can you tie in to enable that survivability? What are some other things we need to consider here from a protection standpoint?
Your emissions control.
Emissions control, yep.
How much are you talking on the radio? How hot are you keeping your vehicles?
Yep. How much of a signature am I actually putting off to the enemy in that static environment that you're just making yourself a target? What else? Yeah. Again, it goes back to preparation and not having a lot of time. How much dig am I doing forward in the obstacle portion versus how much dig am I allocating from a protection standpoint, maybe in the rear area? Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, depending on what task
Sure. Yeah.
That's why the layering and the integration of the direct, indirect fires, everything needs to come together to achieve that.
Yeah, like the class 4 you get, you may be like, oh, I need to make this giant. You know, if you're in Zach's world and you had days to make this defense, but what if you don't have the amount of material to be able to do it? And what if, like, your grand plan is just not there, right? So it's a good point. And then again, it goes back to that balance between how much protection for forward elements, how much protection for people in the rear. If you can't protect your sustainment, then you can't, like, again, balance, okay? Yes?
That example I brought up last time, where we focused on the turning obstacle, like really being able to look and see what kind of micro terrain you have for your defense that can help you prioritize whether, like, hey, do we really need dig assets out here? Can we shape these battle positions by just using the micro terrain that's in place to kind of, instead of having to use those dig assets to build it in, just use that to your advantage for concealment. So looking at it at that level is also really important to help set your priorities.
I would offer also, like, kind of goes back to what Rick was talking about with emissions control, but maybe also dispersion. You may want to be pretty dispersed in your defense if you can, based on the terrain, to help with protection. You may have multiple nodes as opposed to just the normal 2, or you may be split, come back together, split. Like, you may have to be thinking of how you allocate that from a protection standpoint. And one of the whiskey classes will go over like some CP construct, and there's some really good lessons learned that we've had in recent CTC rotations and warfighters about, like, where to employ some of these things or how, instead of just the standard, like, I drive here, I set up talk, I wait until it's time to move because I've been compromised type thing. There's some different things to consider as well. They kind of look at, think of CP as like a PAA, right? Put the CP in the PAA, and it moves around in there quite a bit, just as a quick layman's terms for that one. All right. Cool. Transitions. Again, if we're successful, we are transitioning to offensive operations more than likely. To B's thought earlier about the homework, maybe I've got to consider transitioning to a retrograde because we were not successful, okay? You've got to understand what's actually going on. You also have to understand your own force capabilities. See yourselves, see the enemy, and understand how that can be an impact to what your transition is, okay? So we can go from a defense back to the offense. We can go from a defense to some type of withdrawal operation, retrograde, maybe a delay if we have to, like, fight our way out of there. But also, once maybe hostilities have ended, I can transition back to stability operations as well. Anticipate when. Culminating point, I would argue, is probably both enemy and friendly. What's the enemy force culminating point? Where do you think you're going to hit a culminating point where you got to transition maybe away from the offense because you just don't have the ability to get back on it? But for an offensive perspective, when the enemy reaches that, what's that operational pause? It goes back to that timing consideration. Then there may be, like, the perfect time to go ahead and launch that counterattack or that striking force that really puts the enemy back on their heels and transitions the operations. And if you miss it, you may miss the right time to do so. Area defense, a portion of their force to conduct the attack, so that way I have somebody else hiding out to be prepared for something else. And then line of departure, it goes back to kind of our graphic control measures and how we see to certain things, but I want to maintain contact or I want to regain it, and I need to understand how I'm going to transition back from defense back to the offense. I've got to be able to transition my mobility operations, go from counter mobility to mobility from an engineer perspective or protection. My PPL may change, right? Because I am focused on protecting things in the defense, and now I've got to transition to protect things that move into the offense. So there's quite a few things to consider on this transition. Again, go into stability operations. I may need to, like, immediately move to something completely different. I've gone from just shooting people in the face, and now I've got to go to immediate essential services. And it may just be in that area. And you may have been part of a problem when you came in there and you tied in your defense in that area as well, okay? You've got to understand the ROE. You've got to understand how to remove some of those protection functions in order to enable some other things potentially. Now we've gone from maybe LISCO to did we create some type of pocket of instability, and now I'm kind of doing some coin type things around me. Security of my MSRs, ASRs, security of my my nodes, etc. And then again, retrograde. My defense is just falling apart, okay? I can delay, which I'm trading space for time. I can withdraw. I'm moving away from the enemy, whether I'm in contact or I'm not in contact. And then eventually just retrograde. Maybe something happens in a different part of the AO. You were set up in a defense, and it's time to just transition to something different. I can retrograde. I can move away from the enemy formation, not in contact in any way, shape, or form, okay? How do I reduce the strength of the enemy? Mutual support, when it talks about providing friendly reinforcements. Where do I concentrate my forces? Do I need to go to a different area and set up a defense in a better location potentially? Or am I trying to bring forces in? Am I trying to pull the enemy into a specific location as I'm conducting this? Questions on what we just went over? Deep, close, and rear, planning considerations, and transitions. Okay, so we'll jump into the PE. So what I recommend you do is you take, as soon as I'm done with this, you take a 10-minute break, you come back, you start knocking out the PE. And we have transitioned to the western portion of the AO. So now we are 2-2 striker and 1-1 ABCT. You have the 1AD INSUM, COA statement and sketch, task org, and you're disrupting enemy brigade combat groups between orange and white, preventing the 16th ACG from enveloping 325. 325 is in a perimeter defense. 2-2 is the initial main effort. We'll block along bronze to prevent 16th ACG from penetrating vicinity of the I-15 corridor. So again, still in the same area. I've got larger blow-up maps. We're still defending in vicinity of the NTC terrain. Begin parallel planning, conceptually understand tactical problem, operational environment, etc. What's my problem statement? You're seeing a theme. Initial planning considerations by warfighting function. An initial mission statement. What potential defensive operations, what types am I going to employ here? And then some initial graphic control measures and some potential transition portions. Please focus on kind of in order as you go through this one today. I'm not saying that you guys didn't have great work in the offense last week, but I think we may have gotten a little too detailed in some areas for what we're trying to get with this PE. And because of that, we may have missed some things, like if we don't understand the problem, then how do we understand the mission, etc. Okay, so please prioritize in order as you go. That will be helpful. And I don't need, also, like, we can be very conceptual when it comes to the graphic. You don't have to put grid lines. Like, if you had minimal time to show your boss what you were going to do, how would you show in concept the type of operation that you would conduct? Does that make sense? If that's not clear, like, let me know. Zach, you're the XO for the striker team. I did split up the group this time again, so Alpha and Bravo, so you're not all the same. Paige, you're the XO for the Armor Brigade combat team. So what I'll do is we'll just keep it simple. Zach's crew, you stay on this side of the room where Zach is. Paige's crew, you'll come over to this side of the room where she is. And then again, here are the documents that you have inside of Blackboard, and I printed off some larger portions of this 1ID COA sketch that you guys can use. They're on the table, 2 per each group. INSUM, again, it's got some different elements of 16th ACG for their attack. And their COA statement is in here as well. Questions? Paige, here are your 2 of these. Zach, yours are over there on that table. So again, take a 10-minute break and come back to your leaders. Oh, yes, ma'am. Did I miss somebody? Did I double somebody up? Who did I double up? Where are you, Justin?
12 on group 2 and then 5 on.
Bratton, am I missing you too? What did I do? All right. Okay, I'll figure it out on the break. Justin, stay on this side, and I'll put somebody else over here. I'll figure it out on the break. My bad. All right, take a break.
That's right. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, sir. Thank you for.
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't know.
Bratton and Joe, just a reminder, if you guys are going to talk from the back. So we can keep you guys out of the camera.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, I'm going to have the ABCT go first. And I really want to go through like 7 minutes, go start to finish, okay? And then we'll kind of quickly discuss, and then I'll give you guys your 7 minutes, start to finish, and then we'll quickly discuss. Make sense? All right. So I'll turn it over to Paige's group.
Kick it off. Our identified problem statement is: how does 1-1 AD disrupt multiple enemy brigades in order to prevent envelopment of friendly forces, 325th ID, and protect civilian infrastructure, given 48 hours? A combat urban and unrestricted terrain, a BCT reinforced with a combat engineer, and then focus effects north of phase line orange and south of phase line white, while being prepared to transition to follow-on operations.
Main points for planning priorities: we looked at C2 first, task organization, identifying who our main supporting efforts are, as well as the shifts and transitions of that between the defense based off of enemy actions. For maneuver, we were looking at key terrain and how that's going to drive our EA development throughout the operation. For intel, we were looking at locating where the enemy is, what their course of action is, what their objectives are, and the intelligence collection plan to determine that. For fires, we were looking at delaying and disrupting in depth, and then neutralizing and destroying high-value targets throughout the area, throughout the AO. For sustainment, priority class 5, 3, 4, and 8, and fixing as much of that as forward as possible so we can prepare for that. Protection, looking at survivability as our key asset, not asset, but our key task, as well as ADA plan and how our coverage of that looks throughout the defense. Any questions, I'll pass it.
All right, and moving into our mission statement. So we've got 1-1 AD conducts area defense to disrupt enemy BCGs from phase line white to phase line orange, no later than H+48, in order to prevent the envelopment of 325 ID. Be prepared to secure AO up to phase line orange. I'll pass it over for...
Okay, so for the type of defensive operation, we're executing an area defense. The reason we chose area defense is due to the enemy composition. They have 5 motorized infantry battalions, and we only have 1 heavy cavalry squadron with 2 combined arms battalions. Also the terrain, so while there's not a lot of natural existing terrain, there is a lot, it's a highly suburban area, so a lot of man-made obstacles there as well. Going into kind of our layout, so to the north we've got our boundary with 1st AD. This is our rear area from phase line white to phase line yellow. Our main battle area would be phase line yellow to phase line bronze. And then our security area is going to be phase line bronze to phase line orange. So our brigade deep, where mostly reconnaissance, counter-reconnaissance efforts are taking place, our main battle area, and then the brigade rear, where you've got our C2 FSCs, our ADA company. There's also some CA and some PSYOPs back here. The way we've kind of busted it out, there's a river along our eastern flank. There's also a river and a water feature that runs here. So we've basically split Highway 395 into 2 battalion-size engagement areas. Primary engagements here, each battalion have a subsequent battle position here, and then if the enemy does cross this boundary and go into the KHO area, we've established a supplementary battle position here. Granted, it probably shouldn't be so close to the border. Obstacles, so we've got a turning obstacle to keep the enemy away from our boundary with 2-2 SBCT over here, and then also a block obstacle on the main avenue of approach that bisects the AO. Pending any questions. I'll be followed by transitions.
So looking at transitions, color-coded, enemy friendly, and then greeny for everyone. Culminating point, destruction of 2 brigades, which that point would transition from defense to offensive operations. Considerations for civilian, looking at both Hellendale and then Victorville. So both of those are south of phase line orange. So in order to transition from defense to stability, that would have to be by way of offensive operations to get down there to the south. So wouldn't necessarily transition directly from offense to stability operations, but that considerations of that being the collateral damage and then potentially IDPs was one of the critical tasks from division. And then lastly, transitioning to conduct a retrograde, potentially delay, likely not a withdrawal, just trying to get out of there, delay maintaining contact, and then not a retirement, because at this point we're expecting to be in contact. So those are kind of the big 3, one enemy based and then friendly based, looking at transition to the offense.
Questions from the other group? Paige, what did you and Zach talk about amongst each other?
So when I went over there initially, we talked about what he was doing, what he saw would happen to the enemy with his plan, and then talked about kind of how we should lay in with our plan, what we were planning on doing, and if we need to adjust from there. And then he came over again, made sure I was tracking and saw the 48 hours from the phase line and that we had a more open avenue for the enemy to come up into RAO, and they had generally a wet gap crossing to go over around phase line gold, so they might have a little bit more delayed contact, which kind of went into timing, talk about timing as well.
Okay. Why did you choose an area defense? It doesn't have to be you, you can pass it off if you need to, but why an area defense, vice
Yeah, so we went back and forth, understand that we're enemy focused, disrupting in order to prevent influence on 325 ID here. But like I said, largely like enemy composition, they have a significantly larger force, so we wanted to use, we thought if we gave up the advantages of to go mobile and to go into a maneuver defense, that would present more risk than staying static.
Would it have still been tactically, or doctrinally, excuse me, would it still been doctrinally correct to do a mobile defense?
Correct.
Why?
Because you're enemy focused, primarily because you're enemy focused.
Is the division terrain or enemy focused? 1AD's mission. I'd argue they're terrain. But does that mean the brigade can be enemy focused to enable the division's mission? Okay. I heard you guys talking about you had made some decision points to transition to a mobile defense potentially. I just want to make sure it's clear. Just because the division's mission is terrain focused doesn't mean that the subordinate echelons can't adjust, right? Your mission was to block, right? Because you were retaining specific terrain. Their mission was disrupt enemy to prevent an envelopment. And so they could have gone with a mobile defense, but that would require a lot more timing. Potentially you cause an issue if you strike the wrong force and then they envelop, right? But it would have been fine if they chose a mobile defense vice an area. I just want to make sure you guys understand that. The division may be terrain focused, but if they task the brigade to be enemy focused, you can kind of go with either or. I'm not saying an area was fine as well, right? What do we think of the mission statement? Can be in the group or out of the group. 11AD conducts area defense to disrupt enemy BCGs from white to orange in order to prevent envelopment of 325. Yes, sir.
Their space that they're trying to say that they're going to disrupt across is it's too large. They say from orange to white. I guess if it was more of a mobile defense, that would make more sense.
So you're talking about the depth from phase line white to orange? Yeah.
I understand why they said that, because they're trying to prevent the envelopment behind them at the same time. Sure. But I think it gets away from what they're actually doing on the graphics, which is trying to keep the enemy in front of them.
It's possible that, so you got main body area, and then I see brigade deep, but really what is this? Security area, right? I'm not saying you don't have to label it, but I would do security area, main battle area, right? Maybe I'm disrupting orange to yellow, recognizing that this is my rear area. I don't know, kind of semantics. I see what you mean. The division told you, you own from white to orange, so you're disrupting in there. Potentially you could have written it instead of white to orange, you could have done a different phase line. Potentially you could have said, you know, in vicinity of, you could have made an objective or engagement area Bravo and engagement area Delta. Like, you know what I mean? We could have done something different there. Why conduct area defense to disrupt?
It's a form of defense tied to a tactical task.
Okay. Could I have just said 1-1 AD disrupts enemy BCGs in order to prevent the envelopment? And then I could have gone later on as we go into more planning. Concept of operations. We will conduct this by you doing an area defense. Okay? So, but it's clear, their tactical task is to disrupt, and they are preventing the envelopment of 325 in that perimeter defense that's off of the map. Or really, it's kind of like, right, yeah, it's in this little circle here. Okay? Everybody see what I mean by the difference between conduct area defense to disrupt versus disrupt? Okay? And then it's not wrong. You could have then gone into, hey, in my concept of operations, similar to how the division wrote it. If you saw how the division did it, they're like, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and then in their concept of operations says, we will conduct this by executing this type of operation, right? Okay. I like how you weren't required to do this, but you used it to help build this. I think it was influenced by that. No significant issues over here. Why did we pick two BCGs? Just curious. Okay. And then be prepared to conduct retrograde, delay. I thought there was one more thing I wanted to hit, but maybe not. So you chose enemy culminating point, 2 ACGs, transition to offensive operations. And also I thought it was a good point when they talked about moving to stability operations, where that was located in time and space, right? Not just, I got to be prepared to go to stability ops. They actually thought of where I might need to conduct that, right? Okay. All right. Any questions, comments from the other group before I hand it off to you? Cool. Let's move over to the other side. I'm going to hand this off to Zach.
Mike will actually be leading us off.
Okay, to Mike. Mike takes the mic.
Okay, so with our problem statement, we have how do we prevent the OSMMT from gaining access to I-40 and I-15 corridors in canalizing terrain against 16th ATG, consistent of these elements of the task org, given our task org, 22 SBCT, infantry battalions, engineer company enablers, PSYOP CA, ADA, CBRN, in 48 hours with consideration to civilian population in the greater Sidewinder Valley area that we're in and along the MSRs, namely Barstow Highway, I-15.
So for mission, 2 ID blocks along phase line bronze no later than H plus 48 hours in order to prevent 16th ACG penetration along the I-15 corridor. Going to the next, the type of defense, we selected an area defense with the variation being defense of a linear obstacle.
Taking warfighting function planning considerations, just some key things to pull out. So looking at that recon, counter-recon fight, division already has task organized one of our battalions to help us with the recon, counter-recon fight. So understanding how we're utilizing the different assets that we do have available to us in order to gain that picture of the enemy, especially looking at NAIs to answer PIRs. How are we integrating fires in depth, especially once the enemy crosses the river in vicinity of Victorville? As they start moving towards our engagement areas, how can we attrit them in depth? how can we, some of our things that we got to think about for movement and maneuver is we're going to have recon assets out in front. How do we R-pull them back through our formation? How do we, while conducting counter mobility operations, prepare that defense and then be prepared to close that defense upon completion of the R-pull? Looking at sustainment, where do we pre-position assets to enable the defense? How do we then push assets forward to enable our transition? Talk about that later on. And then protection, some of the things that we talked about for denying enemy recon with counter UAS, counter fire, things like that. And then where are we placing our headquarters to command and control the fight. Hand it over to Brett for transitions.
So in talking through transitions, pretty much most likely what we're going to want to do, go to the offense. And so we're going to want the enemy to hit that culmination point, reduce their combat power, but then also preserve our own combat power for the offensive. Be prepared to do a reverse breach, so going through any of those obstacles that we've in place. Be prepared to utilize our reserve for the exploitation if they are going to pursue with the enemy. And then that R-pull that's going to happen with 2-1 infantry. And then in the event that we do take like our integrity, like defense integrity fails, if they the enemy shows on our NAI that they're going to go do that envelopment, then we prepare for a retrograde. And so that'll be based on if our assets are a lot like attrited, but it would be that delay. We also did kind of map out a stability, but with the IDPs in the valley and everything, it wasn't like a most likely kind of transition, but we would more likely go with the offense as a priority.
I'll hand it over to the map. As I walk over, the stability thing, we looked at where we were at on the battlefield outside of Victorville and outside of Barstow. Minimal reason for us as we continue to block to need to transition to stability operations.
Okay, so taking a look at the map, I'm going to go over the enemy situation to visualize kind of what's going on, and you can see where we're setting up the blocking position and why. So we've got two enemy course of actions that were sent to us from high. We have most likely and most dangerous. What you see currently depicted is the most likely. In the most likely course of action, 165 BCG is conducting that penetration where we have our block, and their intent is to successfully conduct the penetration to allow 166 BCG, which is their depth attack group, to flow through to take Barstow, vicinity of Barstow. So most likely course of action, that's what we're looking at. We have NAIs set up to identify this course of action. In the most dangerous course of action, we have 164 BCG, which is in the defense in those simple battle positions, coming out of those battle positions and conducting a fix. So they're going to conduct the fix while 165 moves west and 166 moves west after 163 conducts their fix, as you saw over there, and they're going to flow through and do an envelopment to take Barstow. So some of our priorities for collection is simply identifying, are we being fixed or are they conducting the penetration? And some of those ways we can do that is by conducting NAIs on their assets. So where are their engineering assets, for instance? Are they prepared to conduct a breach? Where are they moving their tanks? Because we see a little bit of different composition in those units based on what they're trying to accomplish. In addition to that, we have NAIs looking at key assets, some of their MRLs and artillery pieces. We've assessed a range ring of 40 to 50 kilometers based on the systems. So we are within their range, and we're going to expect some of those suppression fires as they're conducting that penetration. As far as intel handover lines, we have them depicted here. So phase line bronze, we have the intel handover line between 1st Armored Division and our brigade. And we're also requesting that the CFL moves to match bronze. It's currently at phase line orange. So that's something we're going to send to higher. And then the intel handover line between Corps and 1st Armored Division is phase line gold. So depending on where those intel handover lines are, and that's who's going to collect on those NAIs. Hand it over to Rick to talk the blue side.
Yeah, so as Zach already highlighted, we were tasked with one battalion forward in our security area to conduct screen. That's going to be a battalion minus, so we will steal a company from them. Moving up into our main battle area, so we're tasked organizing our remaining two battalion headquarters, basically east and west side, with our DO being the battalion here on the east side. Sorry, main effort.
Thank you.
Being battalion here on the east side. We then have a R-pole lane plan for our forward element to transition from screen And then they'll move to a central location near Barstow Highway and act as battalion reserve once that RPOL is complete. And then we have blocking positions templated through the 4 avenues of advance the enemy could utilize to transition south to north.
Okay. I think the only thing I don't see is like actual engagement area. I don't see, right? It's not drawn up there? Okay. But we've got specific obstacles. Good discussion on why you chose this based off the enemy. I think what was good about one thing we saw over there is they were clear on this is my security area, this is my main battle area, this is my support area. That might help you guys visualize this as well, especially when you talk your intel handover lines with division and brigade. What do we think about this portion of the problem statement where I've got OSMT and I've got 16th ACG? Anybody picking up what I'm putting down?
It's too broad.
Well, yeah. Not only that, but how big is OSMT? So are you really worried about OSMT? What if they just go completely around you? So your problem statement probably needs to be something that you can actually impact yourself. Now, it does get after the broader purpose, right? So, but I guess what I'm saying is maybe how do we retain I-40 and I-15 corridors in canalizing terrain against 16th ACG? That's the enemy that's directly in front of me, right? I would even argue you could probably break this down into the, the 164, 165, et cetera. Is that what you had said?
I argued to break it down one more level. I said.
I mean, he's just an intel officer. What does he know, right?
What does he know? That's what I said.
But you guys see, I mean, that one's arguable, right? 16th ACG is like directly in front of me with multiple brigades, right? We talked about how 5 BCGs, I need to attrit 2 of them, culminate 2 of them to be able to go back to the offense. But I think we talked enemy twice here. It's like, how do I prevent the enemy in canalizing terrain against the enemy? And that's what kind of lost me on that portion. I would argue you could just say, focus on blue. Like, what do I have to do from a terrain perspective against the enemy formation that, again, is directly in front of me? And the reason I bring up OSMT is like, what if they don't even come through that AO? What if they just completely bypass you? It's no longer really a problem for you at that point, right? One more thing I want to tease out on problem statements that would be good for both of you. How many of you had a commander that didn't like a question mark at the end of the problem statement? I've had that before. I've had a commander who's like, is it a problem statement or a problem question? And we taught you the how do we, okay? So I want to make sure that we could adjust this. What could we write here instead of how do we?
We prevent or we retain. Just get rid of the question.
Maybe. So, yeah, unit must, right? So maybe you throw the word must in as like that's my problem. 1-1. Or excuse me, 2-2, what are you? 2-2 SPCT must control this terrain, et cetera, against this enemy force. That's another way to write it. If you want to make it problem statement versus problem question, I tell you that because you will have that commander that doesn't like it, and you'll be like, well, they taught me in CGSC, I got to write how do we. You can adapt that language to your commander to make it a problem statement and get rid of the question mark, if you will, right? I'm indifferent. I don't care either way. But I just want to make sure that we could see that from a different perspective, okay? Nothing crazy I wanted to hit. Yes?
Just one thing from the other class, actually, 5 Delta. One thing that they came up with that neither of us thought of was how do we incorporate how the division reserve is going to be implemented in our area of operations. And I mean, I just threw some lines up there at the last second, but they had it fully like integrated, and this is the avenue approach that they're going to take. And just something for us to think about is, again, how are we nesting with higher?
Okay. Good point. All right. All right, take your seats. Let me wrap up a couple things. Thanks, Moss.
Did you notice what he did there? Everyone speaks into it from the bottom side. So it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, because they're like...
Yeah, yeah.
That's fun.
Okay, stay with me. Stay with me. Okay, just wrap this up. We talked purpose of defense, talked characteristics. The taxonomy, again, goes back to the types that we've discussed. And then I think you guys got a lot out of the PE in terms of seeing how you can apply this. And really, again, we had a good discussion on the division is focused on the terrain, but we can go enemy focused if we need to, right? So it's a consideration. Atinch?
I want to ask something about the mission statement.
Yes, sir.
The other group. You said that you don't have to say area defense.
Yep.
But do we have to say or not to?
You do not have to say.
Mobile defense and area of defense have different characteristics.
Correct. So I would argue that in this mission statement, we were getting into the concept of the operations, how we were going to employ that defense, much more than your task to disrupt, your task to block. So I would say your mission is tactical task to prevent envelopment, and then later on in your execution paragraph, you can go into, we will conduct an area defense.
I mean, while you are writing to battalion commanders or battalions, we have to say that what we need to do, area of defense, mobile defense, for in higher echelons, we don't have to say. Just we can say you disrupt the enemy.
Sure.
And the brigade can make a decision about which defense, mobility or area of defense, which one we implement. But I think in level echelons, we have to say them what to do.
I think you could do both still. Your mission does not have to be exactly how you're going to conduct it. It does not have to be the type of operation.
Yes, but
because you're going to tell them later anyway. What's my mission? My mission is to block. And then later in paragraph 3 of your op order, or what you're talking about, then you can go into how you're going to conduct that block. I'm going to do an area defense of a linear obstacle. Because here's a portion here. Let's think of this. Mission statement, conduct an area defense. You got to plan 2 COAs. Are both your COAs now an area defense? Because you said the mission is to do an area defense. If you would have said, my mission is to disrupt, COA 1, I want you to do an area defense. COA 2, I want you to do a mobile defense. They both achieve the same thing. Okay? So again, it goes into the, in my opinion, the concept of the operation is a better way to lay out how that type of operation happens. It's a good question to teach. Okay? We won't go through all of these. I hope you guys have understood that under the context of why we would do a division operation focused on the defense, and really how both can be if you're terrain-based versus enemy-based, and how I can apply those separately. And then we had a very long, or not long, but good discussion and good focus on the warfighting functions and how your specific branch or functional area can impact this, from a planning perspective, execution perspective. Don't forget what happens if you're in the defense and things change and now all of a sudden I've got to do RDSP and completely change the plan as well while you're under contact, okay? Any questions of anything defense before we position to the quiz? Nothing from Alpha, nothing from Bravo. Okay? So we're going to move to the quiz now. I went in and looked at it already, so you should be able to see it. Can the US students see the quiz? Can the IMS students see the IMS quiz? Great.